There are two things which I kind of want to focus on with this topic, with finding your purpose in life. And they're kind of exemplified in the two passages which I've read off. Kind of the first thing that I'd sort of focus is kind of sort of exemplified in the in 2 Timothy 1:9. And it's kind of the standard answer that if you've been around a church for a while, you've probably heard to that question, to the question of what is God's purpose for my life? Well, obviously it is to worship and serve Him. And in going more into the sort of specifics, which a lot of times it's kind of really what we're asking. I mean, when we're asking, what's God's purpose for my life, we're usually looking like, okay, well, what does God want me to do with my life? What's kind of the career direction or whatever that I'm called to by God to do. And sort of when we get into that, you kind of get sort of similar sorts of answers. It's what, God has a plan for you, and you just need to be listening for His voice. And, a lot of times it's the passions that He's given you. That's kind of the sign that you need to go. And, like, once you see that sign, go for it. And all of this is true. I'm not going to say that we need to ignore that. And there's a reason it kind of gets said all the time because it is true. It definitely is the case. But I do think that a lot of times, for many of us out there, we find that to be kind of lacking. You maybe kind of get to the end of hearing those sorts of things and go, well, I still have no idea what my purpose for life is, Um, and this didn't really help. It's just kind of the same sort of standard sort of answers. It's usually only once you've actually found that you're able to kind of look and go, okay, yeah. And I think another piece of it that gets missed, and admittingly, as somebody who has preached sermons like this, especially, I think actually within the last year I did something like this. Um, you know, it's definitely something that we kind of get caught up in, and we sort of miss this other part, which is that sometimes God calls us to do things that we don't necessarily want to do at the initial point. And this is, of course, the story that we see with Jonah. Jonah is given a purpose. He's given a direction in his life to go to Nineveh to preach to them, to call for their repentance, and he didn't want to do it. And there's good reasons for it. Nineveh was the capital of one of Israel's greatest enemies at that time, and he really, you know, he just didn't want to go there for that very reason. It was a bad sort of experience. It was a bad sort of experience. It's one that's maybe a little hard for us to sort of fully comprehend because, especially if you live in America, because we don't really have a country like that. That's a big sort of rival in that sort of way. But going to Nineveh was to him the last thing on his mind, and so he decided he wanted to go as far away as possible from it. Now, obviously, the part with Jonah here is that didn't work out so great. God still had that purpose for his life and was still going to make sure that he fulfilled that purpose. And so, he got to Nineveh eventually. It just was not through the most pleasant of ways, unless you think, living inside the belly of a fish is, a pleasant sort of experience. And while I don't think any of us necessarily end up in the same sort of situation as Jonah always, I think some of us do. I know I definitely have experienced that in my life. I do think that there is a tendency sometimes for us to kind of miss that sometimes God is telling us what our purpose is, and it's the thing that we just don't want to do. It's the thing that we kind of hear and we go, no, that's not exactly what I had in mind, God. I'm going to go off and do something else. And we kind of need to be reminded that, if we're called to do something, there is a reason for it. And that even if it might not seem like something like the thing that we have planned for our life, we should still kind of go after it and trust that God is going to show us the reason for it eventually. It might not even be while we're doing it that we see that was a part of all God's plan for our life and really our purpose, His purpose for our life. But it is something that we need to kind of keep in mind. Callings are not always the thing that lines up with what we want, and that's an important thing to kind of keep in mind with all of this. So I hope that you found that helpful wherever you are. And I wish you all a happy new year again. Stay safe, and I will see you next week. And of course, we are now going into our last song as well, so I would like to invite you all to join me in singing that.